peak performance, rewarding, suspension of time. Imagine if these were all words you used to describe your own study sessions. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Kian. I'm a third-year medical student, and today I'm going to be sharing how I am able to stay focused and even enjoy long hours of studying while in medical school. Yesterday, I live streamed a 5-hour live study session. Well, it was actually 4 hours, 58 minutes, and 35 seconds because I know that there will be a stickler in the comment section down below. I fully enjoyed this 5-hour study session and I was engaged, focused, present, and the time flew by. And you can feel this exact same way about a 5-hour, 10-hour, or 12-hour study session with the advice I'm about to give you. Chances are you've probably studied or done some other activity such as practicing a sport or practicing music where you feel fully immersed in the activity, you're undistractable, and time seems to warp and go by very quickly. The key is to be able to figure out how to replicate this mental state so that you can induce it to your advantage and study for long periods of time, be productive, and be fully present and focused on the material that you're studying. So what's the secret? The secret is being in a mental state known as flow. And today I'm going to tell you exactly how you can induce a state of flow, as well as all of the benefits that will come afterwards. But first, what is flow? I had heard about flow in various other YouTube videos such as notability, as well as the Tim Ferriss podcast show, which is a podcast where Tim Ferriss interviews world-class performers and breaks down the keys to their success. Flow, first described in the 1990s, is a psychological state described as being fully engaged in the successful pursuit of an activity. More interestingly, when you are in a state of flow, the activity that you are engaged in becomes intrinsically rewarding. If we extrapolate this to studying, this means that the process of studying alone can be something that your brain finds rewarding. So if the prospect of enjoying studying but also having an internal desire to study sounds interesting to you, let's talk about ways you can induce a state of flow. So the first thing you need to do in order to plan for success is to match the level of challenge to your skill level. For me, when I'm studying, I always start with a warm-up. Much like warming up your muscles, I think it's very important to warm up your brain. One of my favorite ways to get the brain warmed up is to do some passive learning. I know that there is limited evidence for passive learning. However, if you start with something too challenging, you will easily become defeated. Passively watching a video on a topic is a very low friction starting activity, so it's easy to get yourself situated in the study space and further prepare you to get in the zone. So my favorite things to do are to watch a video or rewatch a lecture. Osmosis and Online MedEd are two resources that I particularly like, where I can look up a topic which is of interest for my study session, and I can get a good overview of what I will be studying. After my brain is warmed up, I like to step up the intensity and do something that involves active recall. For example, I will flip through my Anki cards that are due for the day. Another great way to study is to do the Feynman technique. Lately, I have been using notability, and with their toggle feature, you're able to hide parts of your notes. And for myself, I find it really effective to pretend that I am explaining the hidden parts of my notes to a friend, a fellow medical student, or someone who is not an expert in the field. Using a whiteboard to explain these concepts, as well as verbally express what I'm trying to explain, is a great way to use different parts of my brain, as well as identify gaps in my knowledge. Now, in order to make this first part as successful as possible, you want to minimize distractions. I made a whole video about combining productivity tips, and some of the tips that I have taken forward with me is keeping my phone in a different room, far away on Do Not Disturb, putting my laptop on Do Not Disturb so I don't get iMessages pinging in, and also using a focus app to block distracting websites. By fully blocking out these common distractions, what this means is that if I am on a trajectory that is going to place me in a flow state, nothing is going to push me off of that trajectory. The second aspect of the preparation phase is setting clear goals for yourself. This sounds really obvious, but I'm going to break down these goals even further. You want to make your goal a SMART goal, which means that it is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time sensitive. So for example, I may have a broad overarching goal of I want to be a great doctor, but we need to narrow this down. We could narrow it to I want to be fully competent and comfortable with all the topics on this test. But I need to break that down even further. I need to select a single objective, such as I want to understand the medical and surgical management of obstetrical bleeding. Now that we've made this aspect of my goal very specific, the next part is to make it measurable. For example, I could say, in this next 5-hour study session, I want to read through 3 cases of obstetrical bleeding, I want to watch all 3 online med-ed videos about vaginal bleeding, and I want to understand obstetrical bleeding to the point that I can explain it to a friend. After creating this specific and measurable goal, I need to reflect and think, is this achievable? And in my opinion, this is very achievable because it is one objective and I've given myself plenty of time. A great way to see if your study goal is relevant is to see if it is a high-yield topic that is likely to show up on your exam. A few ways to determine this is 1, to look at the session objectives. If it's a main objective in bold, chances are it's really important for you to understand, both for your medical career but also for the exam. Second way to tell if it is relevant is to pay attention to the time allotted to this topic in lecture. For example, if we have an obstetrical lecture and they commit 50% of the entire lecture time to talk about vaginal bleeding, chances are it's very important. Third way to see if it is relevant is to do practice exams, practice questions, and see if this topic comes up much. If it comes up repetitively in pre-made practice questions produced by your school, there's a chance that they're heavily hinting that this is important for you to understand. The last part of the SMART goal is to make it time sensitive. Translation of this is set a deadline. For my 5-hour live study session, I publicly posted my personal study goals of everything I wanted to have completed by the end of the 5 hours. By setting this clear and harsh deadline for myself, I had motivation to finish the tasks. So now we've covered the preparation phase, which are the best ways to ensure that your study activity will help you reach a flow state. But the second thing you can do is tailor your study activity so it mimics other common features of activities that are known to create a flow state. One characteristic of many flow states is known as action awareness merging. This is commonly seen when high-performance athletes perform a trick or a jump. They don't have to experience the same cognitive load as an untrained person trying to perform the same trick, because this is automatic, this is second nature to them. So doing things spontaneously and not really thinking about things seems counterintuitive when applied to studying. However, what you want to do is take out the cognitive load related to things such as formatting your notes, deciding what you're going to do to study, or finding effective techniques. This can also apply to Anki. Creating keyboard shortcuts and a workflow that works for you, that is instantaneous, will decrease that cognitive load so that you can think about the content that is actually on the card and not worry about the Anki algorithm or how you should click or rank certain cards. If you're not an Anki user or a Notion user, this tip still can apply to you. What you want to do is sit down, reflect, and think about study techniques that really work well for you and create an automated framework for how you're going to study when you sit down. Are you going to take notes? Are you going to do Anki? Are you going to use Excel? Are you going to use the Feynman technique? What works for you? And by automating this part of your study routine, you reduce any decision fatigue that you may encounter when you sit down. So many times people will sit down with the intention of studying, they have their goals, but they don't know how to execute these goals. They don't have an automated system. So what ends up happening is you get tied up reading one textbook, and then you decide to jump to watching kianMDvlog videos, and then you try Googling a practice test, and then you try explaining it to a friend, but you haven't actually completed any of your goals, and you've just jumped around, and you're experiencing decision fatigue because you haven't had a preset algorithm that you're going to follow that has consistently worked for you in order to reach your study goals. The second characteristic of a flow activity is that it provides you with unambiguous feedback. So how can we create instantaneous feedback when we're studying? The best way to do this, in my opinion, is to try and explain a concept to a friend who is taking the same class as you. They can give you instant feedback as to whether your understanding is the same as theirs. If you don't have a friend to study with, you're stuck quarantining and it just doesn't work, another way you can get instant feedback is by doing practice tests. The third suggestion that I have for instant feedback is doing something like Anki, because as you flip the card over, you are instantly told whether you have remembered it correctly or incorrectly. The last characteristic of flow activities is that it demands your complete concentration and focus. As mentioned before, I like to put my phone in the other room, put my devices on Do Not Disturb, and use an app such as Focus to block distracting websites. Another thing you can do if you have all your resources downloaded is turn off your Wi-Fi. There are so many benefits to reaching the flow state, especially when it comes to studying. Today I'm going to talk about my 3 favorite side effects of being in a flow state. First is having a sense of full control. This may sound underrated, but when studying can sometimes be anxiety-provoking, when you feel like you don't know the content or you have an exam looming, having something that you feel fully in control of can actually bring you a sense of calmness. The second benefit of the flow state is a loss of self-consciousness. Oftentimes when we're learning or trying to learn, we feel self-conscious about looking like we don't know what we're talking about or we don't understand a concept. However, with the growth mindset, that is the key to learning. The growth mindset states that you believe that your intelligence can grow and improve by learning from your mistakes. However, you have to be willing to make those mistakes. So by being in the flow state and not feeling too self-conscious about getting a practice question wrong, you'll be able to learn more. A third benefit of the flow state is that it makes the experience intrinsically rewarding. Something such as studying that can be monotonous, mundane, and boring at times can actually be something that your brain and body crave. This becomes especially true if you are able to consistently induce a state of flow every time you sit down and study. The last benefit of the flow state, which is probably my favorite out of all of them, is the transformation of time. You have probably experienced this in your life before. When you're working on a project, when you're practicing something, when you're fully immersed, and time seems to go by so quickly. This powerful transformation of time can make something like a 5-hour-long study period feel short and not very painful. So to summarize, flow is a mental state in which you are fully focused and immersed in the successful pursuit of an activity. There are a few ways that we can induce flow when we are studying. First is to match the level of challenge to our skill level. Second is to create SMART goals. There are 3 other ways that we can tailor our study routine to further increase the chances that we reach a flow state. First is to automate as many processes as possible so that we can study spontaneously and we don't have to overthink it. Second is to set up our study in a way that we are able to receive instant and unambiguous feedback. Third, we can eliminate all distractions so that we can dedicate all of our concentration and focus to the task at hand. Alrighty, well that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you found those tips helpful, and if you are able to experience a flow state, let me know in the comments below. The secret symbol is this wavy looking symbol, so if you'd like me to prioritize reading and responding to your comment, be sure to include that. Also, if you want to see more med school, productivity, and study related videos, consider subscribing to the channel, joining the Bean team. Otherwise, I will see you Saturday morning, 8:30 for the vlog premiere, and hopefully see you around on the channel. Bye!